Hi, welcome to Tales from the Sky Lounge. It's a podcast about business, consulting, and venture investing. We get out there in the world, we talk to people who are making it happen, and we get their stories. And if you could like and subscribe, it really helps us get our word out. So today in the Sky Lounge, Teja Yenamandra. Hey, Teja.
Hey, what's up, Todd?
Welcome to the Sky Lounge.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here.
Well, who are you and what are you working on?
Awesome. So my name's Teja Yenamandra. I'm founder of a company called Gun.io, and we're a venture-backed labor marketplace that specializes in connecting high-end freelance engineers with software companies. So we're basically like, upgraded version of Upwork, I would say.
And then before we get too far, I got to ask you about the sword on your wall there. Are you like a ninja or something?
So I've had that for a few years, and I love like Japanese culture and anime and all this stuff. And actually, funny enough, so this art piece next to me, I think I used Midjourney or maybe I don't know, whatever OpenAI calls their art generation tool, and I basically asked it to make like an AI generated like pirate ship with our company logo on it, and then
That's awesome.
yeah. And then I sent it to, I think, paintmylife.com, and they like commissioned this piece. So it's like I got a whole bunch of Japanese memorabilia and stuff all around here. So yeah, I'm a big nerd.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of knew the answer. You're kind of a ninja, right? You used to do jujitsu for a minute, right?
Yeah, no, I did it I trained for like 8 years or something like that.
Okay.
It's when you run a business, it's like tough to balance, all that stuff, working out, training martial arts and working. But yeah, I trained for a long time, and then I sort of tore my ACL, and then most recently got stem cells injected into my knee. So I will keep you posted on how that turns out.
Okay. Yeah.
I think optimistic.
Go slow,
Oh,
play the rest while you can. Well, and then you've had quite a good run here with Gun.io, and I can only imagine. Exercise is one of those things where it helps you de-stress, so it's great to a point. But then and then there's a balance where you can get a little bit nuts with your other life, and then your business starts to falter. Maybe talk to us about how you think about that, and then kind of where's the line, and how do you know?
Yeah, there's like some concept in like exercise science around like basically like your peak ability to recover based on all the different factors in your life, how much sleep you're getting, what your stress levels are like during the day. And I find that like, if I work out like twice a day and I also have a demanding work schedule, like it's not like we're just hanging out at a desk and chilling, like we're trying to solve problems, right? Scale a company and solve client problems, all this stuff. And so uh, there's a balance where I think if you train too much and if you work too hard, it's really hard to recover unless you're able to sleep like 10 hours a night, which is kind of really difficult to do. But, no training is not the answer either, I find, because then you don't have like an energy outlet. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, the mind works well when the body is taken care of and you're putting good food in it and resting appropriately. So I find for me, I don't know if this answers the question directly, but I find for me like lifting a couple of times per week and then like walking multiple times per day, getting some sunlight in the morning, that helps me perform better at work for sure.
Sure, sunlight, vitamin D.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, in the travel sort of world, it's like the best way if you're facing jet lag is to get up with the sun, get that early morning sun, and then before you go to bed, get that sun too, so your circadian rhythm can reset to like the location of where you're at. That's the key.
So on the business side, there's kind of a flip side to this, right? So if all you do is work out, right, and you don't take care of your business, then your business can falter too. Isn't there kind of the same kind of thing where you can go too hard, too fast in business and then you burn out? It's the same kind of thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's interesting because I would say in the business world, like we really value growth. Like that's what companies are valued on, is how quickly they grow. But I would say, immediately following our sort of institutional round last, I don't know what, 2 years ago, something like this, we actually like, I mean, expanded headcount like really dramatically. And I think there is an argument to where like now, sort of a couple of years afterwards, when you're trying to expand like the business, you want to be able to ingest changes, like any process changes, product changes, headcount changes. You want to give the business time to like ingest, draw those new connections between people, settle into the strategy that you're pursuing versus keep changing stuff or adding people in. You know, so I guess that means like you kind of have to learn to be less aggressive here and there, and just let the company like settle into what's new. Um, yeah,
So change management, there's this theory of, was it forming, storming, norming, and performing? And then you hire somebody else and you go back around and you do it again.
yeah, yep,
But
yep.
it sounds like you're in agreement with that kind of philosophy where, you're always changing, and then you have to give it time to kind of shift through those gears. And then right when
Yeah,
you're performing again, you got to kind of, layer on some more complexity to do it again.
yeah. No, 100%. I mean, we see this with clients, right? Who are like, hey, we want to hire like a bunch of developers at once. Normally we try to recommend, hey, try to do a couple in a batch, ingest, understand output, understand performance, make sure they're, kind of integrated into the culture. Then you can start to stack more and more as you understand, hey, where are the gaps, what's a good fit for our culture and so on. So yeah, totally agreed. 100%.
And so your company is interesting in that you hire and service a lot of US based people, right? You hire US people for US companies.
Yep.
So do you, and then do you consider yourself staff augmentation, or you take on projects, or how do your people tend to work?
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the unique things about our business, and I mean, I think, we're the best in the world at what we do, which is like we get really talented professionals that are, for the most part, independent professionals, like senior level ICs, and put them into companies so that they can go crush whatever project or initiative exists at that company. And so we actually start from the talent side first. And, when my two co-founders and I kind of, identified the opportunity and sort of started the business, we were like, there are a ton of really skilled developers, here or really anywhere in the world that are kind of competing on a price basis on the existing labor markets, like, at the time, Elance, Upwork, now Fiverr, and so on. And we wanted to create a way for like these really talented professionals to find work, not on the basis of price, but on the basis of merit. And so I look at this like, if you're scaling a company, and even us at the board level, we're taught to like, hey, go bring in somebody, make them a key part of the business, internalize core competencies. That's how you build a very valuable company. And that's true for the most part in many cases. But sometimes you need like really entrepreneurial people that are able to own a problem full stack, like not just at the technical level, but at the business logic level. And so we start with that. So we start with the talent side first, and we say, hey, who are the best in the world? How do we get them? And then we work to try to find good companies that need those people. And so I think that operates a little bit differently. I think we operate a little bit differently than how staffing businesses normally operate, which are typically demand side focused first, and then they sort of fill the supply based on demand.
Right. Yeah. And you can make a lot of money and you can lose a lot of money in those arbitrage type opportunities.
Yeah, yeah,
So hopefully
yeah.
you're on the making a lot of money side of things. Um,
It's I mean it's like any other thing in life, right? It's like you get what you get what you deserve in some ways, right? Harder you work, the more precise you are, the better your matches, then it's easy. If you make some mistakes, then it's not so easy. So
so what do you look for in a match? What makes it a high quality match between? So you start with the talent and you find these high high quality individual contributors at a senior
yep,
level, mid senior level, and you
yep.
put them into what, or how do you go about finding a good puzzle fit for them?
Yeah, I mean we must have done, I don't know, like close to 10,000 placements or like engagements at this point. And so for us, one of the things that we've learned is like, so it starts at the match. I think that's the right starting point. And so the anatomy of a good match for us is like, obviously, there has to be some degree of technical alignment between the company needs and the sort of developer needs, because Otherwise, there's a lot of ramp. I mean, and a good developer will argue, hey, if I know X language, I can learn Y language really easily, right? That's true in some ways, but what's also true is then that time to learn this new thing is on the company's dollar, which is not ideal for a company, right? So that's kind of the balance. Good technical skills in some ways, what we've seen in the marketplace is a good signal for being able to learn other new skills that are adjacent, but still there needs to be some basis of a technical alignment on a skills level. So that's kind of step one. Step two is like they have to be um, high ownership, especially in a remote work environment, right? You have to be a proactive communicator. You have to be a clear communicator. And like step three is like you have to be sort of high ownership, high integrity, which is more of a values thing. And so I would say like those are the three levels that kind of are important to check um, when you're trying to make a good match. But I don't think it ends there. Like not only do you have to do that, but I think to do what we do well, you have to also make sure that once the engagement has started, people are performing well together. And so that means like, there's a good statement of work rhythm. That means that like the expectations are clear and the expectations may evolve as the company evolves. So all of that like sort of operating rhythm at the engagement level needs to be handled well. And I think that's actually where like that's what a lot of these high volume marketplaces like don't do very well is they have a lot of labor liquidity even if they're a bunch of fake profiles. There's millions of people there, but like after you find the match, you're kind of like, okay, I got a bunch of tooling, I got to use the tooling to manage the people that I bring on, but that takes work. It's not easy to do. So not just about the match, but I think it's about the delivery as well, for sure.
Well, it's definitely an innovation. There's lots of companies that just make the match, and then you hear from it tax time, and that's it.
That's
right?
it. See ya.
Yeah, which is no bueno. I mean, I guess it works for a lot of people.
It works for their margins, maybe in the short term, but I would argue in the long term, like you want to make sure that people are delivering. So.
Well, what are you seeing in the market right now as far as what are people? You hear horror stories about all these layoffs, particularly with the big companies. Those are usually the last ones to kind of go, and they go in a bunch. So, are people frozen right now? Or are you seeing people start new projects? Or, what do you think? Where's the business cycle right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So like caveat is like I know a lot about a very narrow piece of the world, which is like getting freelance developers in companies and helping them perform. So anything that I say about macro, I'm sort of out of my depth to some extent, but I'll share some observations. So, one of the things that I had felt about like, let's say last year layoffs and the year before, is that like through COVID, we saw massive expansion in our business. And I think other players did too, right? I think like interest rates were cheap, weird things got funded. A lot of companies hired a lot of people. And so I think like when when interest rates spike and when deals don't get done, I think that creates like a lot of shedding. Right? Like regardless of the AI impact, regardless of anything else, I just think like the fundamental economics of like borrowing or taking equity changes, and therefore like companies are not as ambitious about what they're building, and therefore that will impact the R&D line, which that's where developers live typically, right? Developers, product designers, these sorts of folks. So I think that's one level. I think another level is like, you're starting to hear this now around AI's impact, which is like really good people can be even more productive. Right. And so that's how I think it'll shake out where like, you know, it's just like any other tooling where if you can leverage, some probabilistic model to help you create a straw man to think through something, you get to the solution way faster, right? These models are not deterministic. They don't solve things for you. They guess at the solution and you can check it to see if it's accurate or not. So I think like long term, that will likely make developers more efficient. And economists will argue like either way about like whether that will decrease long term the demand for software engineers or increase, right? There's the increase argument is Jevons paradox, right? When they made steam engines more efficient, that actually drove the demand for coal. So, right, the con argument is everything you see on LinkedIn, or people are like, I built a $17 billion company using one person and a dog. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's
Smart dog,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so like that's the pro and the con. And like both sides are kind of clickbaity. Like we'll see.
Yeah.
You know?
It's somewhere in the middle is the truth, right? Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in the middle. You know, I think the reality is like if you're a good dev, you can own the full stack, you'll understand the business logic, you can implement, right? You're talented, you're curious, you're easy to get along with, like the sky's the limit, right? I think more maybe immediate terms, so third level tariff impact. You know, I'm still kind of like shocked that like the market reacted like the way that it did. Um, you know, I guess like fundamentally, if you slap on tariffs, that does affect in some ways GPU costs, cloud computing costs. Like there is some additional cost structure that, you know, us in tech have to experience. Plus maybe H1B tightening will affect our ability to hire people, you know, if we run a domestic company. Um, so, you know, that's some impact, but I don't know. I think we're in like a big game of who will blink first. So I don't expect, I mean, I may be wrong, but I don't expect the tariffs to stay forever. You
Yeah, I
know,
agree. I think it's a short term thing, and then it'll equal out, and we'll get to work pretty quick here.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, and then let's go back to Gun.io. I mean, it's so fascinating how people start companies. Okay, tell us the origin story for y'all. How did you start?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the TLDR is like we were, I mean, working on something else and we tried to go on Elance, I think, and try to find developers to help us work on something because we had to sell. Like I needed to be on the phones and like trying to grow the business. And we just like got inundated with like a bunch of resumes and profiles and we were like, "Ah, we don't have time to filter through this. And also like the tooling of these platforms like was not awesome. And so we were like, we know a lot of smart people. We just like it's just kind of like a weird experience to be like, hey, smart person, come and work for us. Like you have to kind of create like a project structure and like define like what like win looks like and handle billing and invoicing and all this stuff. And so we were just like, it would be neat to do this as like a business because we know that this need exists. And so we kind of one buddy I went to college with, and then another buddy of mine who I met in China when I was living there. We came together, we started the company, and then I mean, for real, we just spent like 40 hours plus a week for like 4 weeks cold calling companies on Angel List. That's all we did.
Okay,
That's it.
okay,
That's it. We just, I mean, we'd hit like 100 dials a day, cold emails, manual. There was no automation in this. Like, we did not think about like, oh, what if we just like scraped a bunch of leads and like, you know, set up an email series. We just were like literally dialing the phone using our cell phones and sending manual emails. And then that got us like our first, I don't know, 100 or something grand in revenue. And that's how we got started. That's it.
hustle, gotta love it. And then who are your founders? So like, how did you said you met them in college? It sounds like, and then one
Yeah.
of them.
So what? Yeah. So one buddy, Rich Jones, he's like one of the most brilliant developers that I've ever met. He's like a contributor to Python, like just solid like open source developer in the community. You know, gives talks on security. He's just a man. He's very smart. And so I would actually say like it was mostly Rich's idea, honestly. And then my other buddy John Paul, he I met him in China when I was working there, and yeah, John Paul is like sort of he was more like the operations sort of like marketing person, you know. So I'd be like, you know, can a 3-person company have a COO? If so, that's what he was at the time.
Sure,
Yeah,
yeah, the glue,
yeah, yeah. He was a glue guy. That's it. Yep,
get
yep,
stuff done.
yep. Get stuff done. That's it. I'm over here, you know, thinking about things that are not important, and JP is doing the real work. So that's JP. Yep.
And then what year was this that you guys started?
Like 2013, 2014. I think we
Okay.
incorporated 2013, and then I would say we like became full time somewhere around 2014 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, where were you in the world? And then how did you get to Nashville from China, I guess?
Yeah. So after I graduated college, I I basically just wanted to go work in China. Like that, I studied Chinese, and I thought it would be cool to live there for a few years. And then I worked for a tech company out there. They sold that company to some public company here in the U.S. And then I moved back, and I moved back initially because I needed to get a labrum repair surgery
Okay.
for my shoulder. Yeah. And so my folks live in Nashville, and I was like, well, I need to get the surgery. I need to like chill for like 3 months. I can't use a computer really. Um, so I came back, got the surgery, and JP was in Pennsylvania, Rich was in the Bay Area at the time, and I was here in Nashville. And then we just started the business. We didn't think about it. Like we were just like, cool, we're remote, like we're serving a remote market. Like we don't need to be in the same place.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were remote first from, didn't even think about it. You just naturally were remote all the time.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, like that's how open source projects work, right? Like they're remote, it's async collab, like, the tooling was not what it is today to do this, but we made it happen. We had no issues. Yeah.
Well, talk about tooling. So what's changed there? And like, what's your go-to platform if you had to start this all over again today?
Yeah, I mean, so this was before Slack was even invented.
Wow. Yeah.
So, right, I mean, because I remember like Slack kind of came out like maybe 3 years, but it's basically a IRC with a nice UI, right? And so I don't know if you remember IRC, but
Oh yeah.
yeah. And so like that's what you would use. Then Discord was like, a more gaming oriented IRC with different like, default settings and basically a different colorway. Um, so I would say like for us, core to our use off the shelf is probably Slack. It's important, right? Because effectively we run a community. We run a community, and we get this community placed into companies so they can make money. That's what we do. So I would say any sort of community software. There's a lot out now too, right? There's like things with different wedges. Like you got school, that's more of like an education based thing for community. You could do YouTube for your subscriber community. So there are a lot of different options today.
Okay. And then so you guys were in business and you got a good head of steam up. And at some point, you're VC backed right now. So how'd that happen?
So I mean, the short story is that we had a couple of acquisition offers, and we were not ready to sell the company, mainly because like we were making a good living, and like company was doing well, and we like what we do, right? Like we like to scale human impact. That's effectively what we do. We take people and we try to put them in companies so they build some cool shit together. That right. And so we just liked it. And I remember we would sit down and be like, is this worth taking right now? And uniformly we'd be like, nah, not really. And I don't know, like we sort of were talking to a couple of our close friends, and some of them suggested, hey, like have you considered taking on like a private equity or venture capital round? And we were like, not really. So we just started kind of gently exploring, and we met a lot of funds. Like we must have spoken to like 30 funds, right? And they ask you, hey, what's the business, blah blah blah, how's it doing? You kind of go through the whole thing. And there was something unique. This actually was like maybe two funds, maybe three, where like I felt like the partner, because when you take investment, like you're dealing with a specific partner, not just the fund. I felt like the partner and the team that we ended up like doing the deal with, they were just like incredible. They're just awesome, really smart, really thoughtful, and just like had like an ease about them um, to where like we talked to like a West Coast fund, and they're like, "Well, you guys are growing like really fast. How can you guys grow faster?" And I was like,
Oh God.
I don't know, dude. I have no idea. No, we know what we do really well, and I want to keep doing that, and I want to make the service and the product that supports the service better, and like that's primarily it. And what I felt like with Ballast Point is that they understood that. And I mean, even through 2023, which was like a really shitty year, I would say, in any B2B company, they were just like, hey, like, company is a good company. Just stay focused. Don't freak out. Like, we're good. And just to have somebody say that, and believe that without even you prompting or messaging to the board that that's the posture to take, that's huge. And so, honestly, the decision to take money was like more organic. And I think for us, it came from a desire to have good partners who see patterns across a portfolio of companies versus us who just have one company. This is what we spend our life building, so
Do you get a lot of good feedback? You said they have a good visibility across the portfolio, across the economy. They probably talk to hundreds and hundreds of really interesting concepts in terms
yeah.
of companies. What do they give? What do they provide to you, or what's kind of been the most aha? Oh, that's interesting moments in dealing with them.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the things that I've observed that I've actually like really I would say brought into my own workflow is just even how they behave, right? Like so much of mentorship is actually not quite like what people tell you. It's like how they act. And I would say like their posture, their demeanor, like their poise, as well as like the focus on relationships has been something that, as like an entrepreneur, you're like very goal oriented. You're just like, here's the goal, whatever we need to do to hit that goal, like that's what we're gonna do. And that kind of works until like your company scales, and then your interface is no longer shit that you're building. It's actually people, right? Like at any level in any business, once you get to a certain level, your interface is only people. It's your finance person, it's your ops person, it's your salesperson, it's all people. And so they're really good at managing relationships. That's all a business is. Hell, that's what our business is. We manage relationships on behalf of developers with clients and vice versa. So um, I think that that's been a huge learning for me and a huge point of maturation. That's not how I always was. Sometimes I still falter. So yeah.
No, yeah. So they always say take smart money or additive money, right? And it has to be a cultural fit. So it sounds like you found a really great cultural fit there.
Yeah,
Um,
for
and then
sure.
there's a fine line between being pushy and in your business and leaving you the heck alone,
Yeah.
to starve
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
float in the wind. So it sounds
Yeah.
like you've struck a really good balance there. That's to your liking. It's beneficial. Um,
Yeah.
do you have
I would
access
say
to more than that partner or that managing partner that is overseeing your board? Or, how often do
yeah.
they say, hey, I got a guy you should meet, or I have a lady, that's involved in some really cool stuff. You should talk.
Every couple weeks, every month. I mean, they're good about deal flow too, like to help our business. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's great. It's there was something that you said that I wanted to touch on. I would say they and I think this is the balance that's really hard. It's like easy to say, but it's hard. It's like, how do you, as a board member in an early stage company, ensure that the entrepreneur is not making mistakes while still allowing some mistakes to happen such that the organization is better off for it, right? Because there's a dynamic where like if you're preventing decisions that you believe to be the wrong decision, that there can be resentment, there can be people can react in weird unintended ways. And so I think they have a really good artful balance. And I think we've struck the same thing where like there's a if like a well-run board is like you solicit feedback, you get pro and cons, you make a decision. And some people may not like the decision, some people may, but you collaborate on the decision and then you go forward and then you disagree and commit. Like that's a well-run board, right? And so to have a well-run board, you need people at the table who, are not only rational but like understand the long game, which is building the company together. Right. And so I think a lot of people complain about like venture back, or they complain about like their board members from X fund, but they themselves are difficult to work with, right? And so it's like maybe the board member has to take a more contentious, obstinate type of valence to be able to like beat a guy over that or a gal over the head with it who won't listen, right? And so I think it
If
is
all
a
your
two-way
exes
street.
are insane, maybe it's not your exes, maybe it's you. All right.
Hundred
All right.
percent. Like we have been very lucky, I would say, generally. Like and so some of that is just being cool, like not being an asshole. I think people are usually cool in return. So
So what's so it sounds like you got a great, vibe going, which is awesome. Ride that for as long as you can, and at some point, there's inherent fun dynamics that come into play, right? So, have you had that talk yet? Or, is there a timer kind of going, or are they, what's the exit look like? Or have you even had those discussions?
yeah, I mean those. We're all in this to make money, right? In some ways, I think where we're aligned generally at the board level is like a money is not the goal. It's an output of like creating a really valuable service for companies and for developers, and doing that efficiently such that the company generates profit and becomes, a very big company efficiently built, right? Um, so for us, like we get a number of suitors every year. That's just the nature of the business. It's the nature of our brand, and so I think generally I would say like we're pretty aligned on like at any point in the growth trajectory of the company, an offer can be so good that you have to take it, right? Because you get to skip a couple of years of building the company. So, I don't know. That's about the extent of like our discussions, but we're not, I would say like I don't want to speak for Ballast Point strategy, but Ballast Point is unique in, and I think their approach in which they really do care about like, and this is not a, if you guys are listening, correct me if I misstate anything, but like I have seen being at these annual meetings that like generally, when a company is killing it and like actually like on the right track, that is when you want to double down and keep growing the company, right? That's when you want to harvest and you want to keep like doubling down. So I think we're aligned basically. Yeah.
When at mid to late stage growth, leading into private equity, they can hold for longer. It's, they have that growth mindset of, hey, this is a good thing. No need to wreck it. Just
And
for the
that,
sake of return.
yeah, yeah. And the nice thing I think too is that like if you raise like $100 million from Tiger Global, you don't really have anywhere to go except be public, right? Like that's your only option. And if you took that 100 million in like 2022, you got a lot of growing to do to justify that price and to end up somewhere good. So your options are limited. For us, we're like a profitable company that took, I don't know, 5 point something million bucks. So like not a lot,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Very easy to make that
so
math work for sure.
easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
And then just to compliment you for a second, I kind of have these patterns and maybe superstitions when I talk to people. I talk to a lot of startup folks and growth company
Yeah.
CEOs. Hey, we just want to, what you just said. Hey, we just want to focus on making a good little company and make it grow
Yeah.
and do the right things, and good things will happen. Like that's always like what the very successful people always say. It's like, look, we're not spreadsheeting this. There's no shenanigans. We're just doing a good job here, making good things, and we'll figure it out. Right.
That's it, and it's like I I think that there's an overemphasis on spreadsheet math. Being data driven is like really important, but like how do you spreadsheet like the joy that a developer gets? They're based somewhere in like Montana and they get like 150 an hour gig. Like, and that opens up a lot of avenues for the family, right? The person is now like employed at a cool company on a contract basis, let's just say, or like, somebody's in Africa getting, 2x, 3x the local developer wage, right? Like, how do you actually um, quantify that? Like, it shows up on the P&L as like, you know, X amount of dollars in revenue. You have a LTV math, you have a CAC, but like that, the value of the company is like doing that repeatedly, and that's what creates an enduring business.
A lot of
So
goodwill in there, and there's going to be a lot of follow-on intangibles that help.
yeah, 100%, 100%.
Well, I know you did a survey, which is maybe not so unusual, but it's interesting that you chose to publish it. State of Work, I think, is what you called it. Just came out. Where maybe talk to us about that. What is this survey, and then kind of what were your what were you hoping to figure out, and then maybe what were some of the interesting nuggets that you got out of that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's this is like part of our regular motion of like checking in with developers and not only making sure that like overall they're happy with like I would say their career trajectory independent of our platform, but what our platform is able to do for them in terms of achieving some career growth goals or financial goals and such. And I would probably boil down like the findings to like maybe just a couple of key points, which is I think a lot of developers are seeing that there's a demand spiking basically for AI enablement in a company's product stack. And so, this is more like glue work, like maybe making like enabling a feature to work off of a LLM backend sort of work, right? But there's also a lot of demand for like, math trained developers, and a lot of folks are wanting to build their careers in that direction, like not just familiarity with implementing some of these new tools, but also like understanding them at a deeper level, which I would say, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but like in the last decade, where there was like ravenous demand for software engineers, like a lot of boot camps and like I would say like professional schools um sort of generated a lot of engineers who could add business value but maybe did not know like the underlying ways that what they were building was actually working underneath, right? And so I think like that's probably going to shift,
Yeah,
right? um
always does.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And
And
then I,
so
I see this like thin veneer. There's a lot of really cool AI tools. Like, business users can come in and use them, power business users and then do interesting things. But there's a limit, to how big that gets. Solve a lot of really tiny little problems and that's meaningful. But then there's this other kind of part of ML, AI where, coding theory, advanced engineering degree, and I hire PhDs to, to do all that stuff. Right. And that's a
yeah,
rare thing, but you
it
can do a
is.
lot of very impactful work, with that kind of project as well.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think we've always seen that, we have the HTML craze, where you can spell blank tag or, paragraph, but that's not really coding, right? So I think you have a lot of surface level IT type work, and that's valuable, right? And we're seeing AI, the new AI wave of LLMs have a huge impact there. And but then we can't forget about this very senior back end, heavy lift kind of ML AI as well.
yeah. I mean, the like most business problems I think can get solved by like having 90% of the work done by a probabilistic, model, right? And or at least it gives you a straw man to then spend some cognitive like energy on the final 10%. And so I think like this type, as you suggest, like, a lot of front end code is being automated. You could drop like a Figma design into Cursor and you get like code, that's like ready to go. So I think like that part of the SDLC, as it were, will, continue to evolve, and I think folks are trying to understand like that workflow. But I think a lot of developers as that stuff gets done, they want to deal in the more complex problems, which is where I think you are served by having a good understanding of math theory and like what actually a vector is, you know? So not just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to glue some things together to use this vector database, you know?
Well, going back to the survey, so what's what's the temperature, or what kind of questions did you ask your coders? That's a very unique perspective on what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like, what type of jobs do you guys want? You know, and like the answer is always like more jobs,
More
right?
money.
Yeah, and more money, but also like more ML, more AI, more things that I can go and like up my skills with some of the tools like PyTorch or what have you, TensorFlow, things like that. Um, I would say, yeah, just like people want to. I mean, I guess the theme is like people generally seem to be wanting to move away from web development into like I would say the software engineering category.
Okay. More architecture and back end, heavier lift.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
interesting. Any surprises in there that you weren't expecting?
Oh, I mean, that's like most of this has been confirmed by if you go external and you look at what the net new job posts are, you look at our demand profile and what companies coming in are looking for. Typically, they're not looking for like, hey, I want a really good front end person. Right? Typically, most people are looking for either full stack or back end or DevOps, something like that, that touches their ability to, build infrastructure supporting all the new AI based features that they want to build.
Hmm. So you see a lot of AI implementation demand. I feel
A
like that's
ton.
going to take about a year, and then everybody's going to get full of that, and you know, the projects are going to be steady state, and then what, right? Then you know,
It's yeah. I mean, you can game it out in a number of ways. This is the hard thing that I haven't had. So, what's your opinion on this? You think that like this wave will go 12 months and then
yeah. I
interesting?
mean, it's cyclical, right? And then the pendulum, it's like a pendulum that goes too far one way and then goes back the other way too far. I've seen a couple of these cycles.
Yeah.
If you're a talented engineer on the back, particularly back end, you work on meaty problems. There's always going to be demand for that. The tools are always going to get a little better every year. Some years
Yep.
they get a lot better. I feel
Yep.
like they just got a lot better. So it's going to save you from a lot of the junk work that you probably didn't like doing anyway. I've been searching for decades. For like, why can't we just like drag buttons onto a design and then click and then get the framework and then let me just implement some of the back end, and then ideally just go and set up an ORM and, set up a database for me with an API. And then like that's like, I don't enjoy doing that, like nobody does really. And it's like, okay, I've already thought about this and it's just hard to get it out on the paper, so to
Yep.
speak. So
Yep.
like
Yep.
I feel like we're finally almost getting there where it's like, okay, I know what I want. I want to build a front end like LinkedIn, like Reddit, like, whatever, and accept this. And then, I ought to be able to get a quickie template that's pretty dang close, and then get the whole thing written, full stack, with infrastructure on the cloud provider of my choice. And then,
That's hard.
well,
Yeah, the back end of the infrastructure is the hard piece, but you can get the front end
but
ready to go.
for a quickie, bare bones template, get going. I call it like a hackathon. Like what I should be able to get a working app. Like last time I did this, okay, I did this dating app. So,
Yeah.
for, anyway, so, and I said, all right, I want to see how much damage I could do. How quickly can I get a simple app into the app store? And
That's cool.
it took a minute, it took a while. Right. And then, I found out what the state of the art was, and there's some UI builders and they got close. Right. And then there's also some infrastructure builders on the back and they got close. So all that stuff's going to get automated, so do you need a good designer, right? Cause I don't, if I pick the color red, then it's going to be wrong, right? There's like evidently a lot of colors of red. So, you know, but that kind of thing. You're going to always need talented designers, and you're going to need UX people to go deep. But you don't need them that first weekend, right? And you certainly don't need them the first month. Maybe a little bit. It's good to know somebody. So I think fractionally being able to access that talent pool is valuable. I think ultimately you do want to own that. And I think when things get complicated is when the business logic comes in. You want to do some really elegant things. If you are a serious architect and you've been around, you know how to design these things to future proof them for a lot of optionality. That's a super valuable skill set as well. And then I think you need a team to kind of take it to the next level. So if you're an experienced dev, 5 to 8 years, full stack, maybe more, that's super valuable. There's always going to be a place in the world for people like that. And then, the young, what I worry about is the young first, second year people necessarily have to kind of specialize in something. You can't possibly know it all. You can get into the market quickly with the app, but you can quickly get into trouble when it gets complicated. If you don't know what you're doing. That's what I worry about. That how do those people start to get experience now? If all this stuff's
you're
automated.
right. That's a risk, especially as these large companies are no longer sort of hiring junior. I mean, this is where like the apprenticeship sort of used to exist, where you kind of had the senior folks train up the juniors and those people became mid-level and they would learn by watching or pair programming or what have you. I still feel like, however, that early companies, like smaller companies, have smaller companies want to play in the game where like they want to compensate on culture, on flexibility, on impact, maybe not as much on cash compensation, right? And they have the ability to hire somebody and let them train up in their business and not add value from day one. I mean, it'll be hard, the expectations will be high, but they're also looking for a deal, typically.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think some space exists there. But it's hard to know which way is up, I would say, because if you look at LinkedIn, it's like, oh, here's some company with 3 people, right? And you're like, okay, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I could see starting with 3, get to 20,
Yeah.
and then not getting much past 20. I think there's an argument to be made there.
Yep.
I think it's all about, the tools are getting better. You still need a person. I can't remember which payments company just came out and they said, hey, everybody needs to be 20% more. Everybody needs 20% of your code needs to be written by AI. Just, thinking
Was it the Shopify
maybe,
dude?
I think that's right.
Yeah, I saw some memo. Yeah.
And then you go, interesting. Like your 10x software person, we always used to talk about, they're already using all kinds of crazy, amplification tools, right? You don't get to be 10x more efficient by just kind of typing faster, right? That's not it, right? You just, know what you want, and then you have tools that help you go faster. And then just mandating that somebody pick up a tool just because is basically saying, hey, you weren't doing enough before. Like that's a dangerous road to go down, right?
I mean, I would say like even in my job, which so much of it is like coordinating people and aligning them on a specific problem, like elevating one priority over another. So much of it, I involve like AI to straw man what I want to say. And I look at that, I'm like, is this the right structural flow for my ideas? And then it probably saves me like an hour or 2 per day.
Oh yeah.
In terms of being able to throughput things to do my job effectively.
What's the best possible spin on your brain, right?
Yes. It's a thought partner that never needs to sleep, that doesn't need to eat, right? Relatively unbiased. So yeah, that's great.
Well, Teja, it's been great having you here in the Sky Lounge. And it's all about traveling and getting out there in the world. Any great travel stories you want to share with us?
Yeah, I have 2. One is maybe what not to do, and then one is
anti-story.
Yeah, and then maybe but one thing that I recommend what not to do. So actually, I remember when I first flew to China. This was like, I mean, over a decade ago, I guess at this point. And a buddy of mine, he's like, "Hey, dude, I want to take you to like this burger joint before you leave. It's like my favorite burger joint." And I'm like in my, I don't know, I just graduated college, I think, at the time, so I'm like 21 or something. And so I was like, "Yeah, that sounds good." So we eat this like super greasy burger. I mean, it's like 3,000 calories worth of just like burger and fries. Yeah, and so then you got basically an 18-hour flight to China, and I'm sitting in the back seat of a I don't know, whatever jet. And so I would recommend not eating something super greasy and being on an 18-hour flight, like no matter what class of cabin you fly. That's like my number one recommendation, is like, doesn't matter if you're flying from one place to the other, just don't do it. Like, in fact, try to fast and not eat anything. That's what I learned. That's what I learned. And then the do. So I think, I'm not like a big luxuries person, I would say generally, but my wife and I, we just got married in India like a couple months ago. And so I flew my mom and I, this is the first time I've done this, flew us business class on British Airways. And man, like, I didn't even want the plane to land. Um, because you're
Yeah.
getting drinks, you're getting food served. They have an unlimited menu of things to watch on the TV. And I was really impressed with the new cabins that they have. It's like, I mean, it basically feels like you're in like your own room, you know. So I would say like one, don't do, and one, if you can swing it, I would definitely splurge on at least once on an international flight, business class, on some of these new planes. I'm
Yeah.
sure they're all very good,
Yeah.
but British Air was legit.
Awesome. Yeah. That's definitely time to use your Sky Miles points, on that
That's it.
very, very long intercontinental flight for sure.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Awesome.
how can people follow up with you on the internet after this if they want to get in touch with you about some of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I try to answer every DM that I get. Most of them are people trying to sell me stuff, but I like it because that's how I got my start, And so I try to have my best to even respond to AEs messaging me stuff. So you can find me on LinkedIn at TEJA. It's my first name and my last name, YENAMANDRA.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll put a link down below.
Awesome.
Well, Teja,
Cool.
It's been great having you.
Yeah. Thanks, Todd. It was a real pleasure. So thank you so much.
Bye for now.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us in the Sky Lounge. Please like and subscribe to hear more from Tales from the Sky Lounge here and anywhere else you get your podcasts.